One of the stalest genres in our hobby is the classic combative area control. You know it, I know it, this whole freaking industry knows it. From Root to Blood Rage to arguably even Ethnos, there is a good reason why there is so much effort to subvert the traditions of this genre, but few preserve the essence of it so well while flipping the entire thing on its head as a war of whispers. Let's take a look. At first glance, this circular smorgasbord has all the trimmings: a world of terrain split into 5 nations, units that can conquer new territory to assert their plasticky dominance, towers for defense, cities for control points, towns for unit conscription. It's all here. But what makes this game tick is that all of these dudes here, they aren't your dudes, they're the board's dudes. Instead, you are the shadowy puppeteer controlling everything from the sidelines, ensuring that the unwashed masses are always working towards your secretive ends. You know, Littlefinger shit. At the beginning of the game, each player places their 5 allegiance tokens face down randomly, peeking only once they are assigned. At the end of the game's 4 rounds, players reveal these tokens and acquire points based on how many cities each of the 5 factions control. Got the Elephant Kingdom in your top slot? Great, push them into nearby Falcon, Horse, or Lion territories. Or maybe 1 or 2 opponents seem to be working pretty hard to support the elephants as well, so maybe you let them do your work for you and focus on the factions that net you less points but are getting less general love. Above all, you work against the factions in the bottom 2 slots, who give you 0 and -1 point per city respectively. This allows for some feints and intrigue. Maybe you make it seem like you're supporting the Lions because you want other players to try to take them down, but secretly you hate the Lions and just want to manipulate your opponents into doing your dirty work for you. But at a certain point, you may find that things just aren't really going your way. Well, at the end of each of the first 3 rounds, players can, after assessing the board, gingerly reveal 2 of their unrevealed tokens and swap their places. But once tokens are revealed, they stay face up for the world to see your naked plans. And being already revealed, these tokens can no longer be swapped for the remainder of the game. But, you ask, how do you actually control all of the factions on the board? Which brings me to one of the most fascinating aspects of this game. At the beginning of each round, players place 2 workers, or 3 in a 2-player game, on the council spaces belonging to the 5 factions at the table. Then, the actions resolve clockwise around the circumference of the board, starting with the Bear Clan, then Falcon, Elephant, Lion, then Horse. Go Mustangs! Thing is, the player on a spot takes the action of their spot, as well as every vacant same faction council position preceding them. So there's a lot of tactical choice to consider here. But contrary to everything worker placement has ever taught you, at the beginning of the next round, you're not actually picking up all of your counselors, or in this case, effectively workers. What you do is you take 1 back, leaving the remaining on the board, and then you have a whole new set that you're placing down. So because you're taking actions of the vacant spots preceding you, even at the beginning of the game, most actions are getting resolved, but it becomes more crowded and dynamic with people alternating between different council actions as the game progresses. It is a beautiful, fascinating, and really clever system. The actions themselves, super simple and mechanically speaking, the least flashy part of this game. Every space has a choice of 2 things you can do, and there are only really 4 different actions. Place dudes in this faction's territories at a flat rate or based on something they control, attack into a territory controlled by another faction, which combat is super simple as well. You immediately lose a banner if the defending territory has a tower, then each faction loses banners at a 1-to-1 ratio, and if any foreign banners remain, then it now belongs to that faction. And for the remaining 2 actions, one of them lets you swap swap your counselor's position with another within the same council and then resolve that new action location, or allows you to draw this faction's cards. From a dudes on a map standpoint, these cards are tactical, well, cards up your sleeve. Each faction has 2 standard abilities on their cards. One you get if you play it on its own, one if you play it and discard another of the faction's cards. But they also have these inter-faction allegiance tactical maneuver super awesomeness where you can play the card but also discard another's faction card for devastating effects. In a game where you can't attack into your own territories and must leave a banner behind when conquering from foreign soil, the ability to just kill off 3 dudes or attack anywhere on the map is a huge deal. All in all, this is a remarkably simple game. It's easy to learn, it's easy to teach, it's quick to play, and within a round, players understand exactly just how devious it feels to manipulate an unknowing world from the shadows. That said, with only 4 rounds to really get your few favored factions rolling, by about halfway through you generally have a good idea who is rooting for what. I mean, there's definitely room for deception, but when your buddy takes over 3 cities with the horses, you kinda know who's banking on the equine win. But it's the simplicity of the dudes on the map aspect of this game contrasted with your relationship to the overall board that really makes this game shine. It totally has the vibe and feeling of an old school fantasy area control, but by removing yourself from a fixed allegiance to any one faction and giving you meaningful ways that you can interact even with the factions that you're opposed to, it provides some robust tension and nuance and takes away some of the kind of sting of take that so many people are adverse to in heavy conflict games, and even makes for a meaningful 2-player experience, which isn't something too common in this genre. If I could point to my absolute favorite thing, it's the subtle asymmetry in the ecosystem. To start with, the horses have no units on the board but control a boatload of cities. Bear Clan, on the other hand, has only 1 city tucked way back, but loads of units to spare. But when it comes to actions, take the contrast between Bear and Lion. 3 out of 4 Bear council positions have the ability to launch an attack, whereas Lion, who have by far the most unit production and card draw, can only attack with their very last council seat. All of this combined with some really thoughtful territory placement makes for a game that feels concise and refined. It does what it does with focus and precision without a lot of baggage attached. That said, I wish I could say the same care and thoughtfulness went into the production of the game, which is much more of a mixed bag. I have the collector's edition of this game, which replaces the standard wooden cubes with plastic banners, has minis for the town, cities, and towers, includes treasure and immediate effect cards to shuffle into the faction decks, has a metal first player coin, and includes plastic counselor minis that you can swap out for your cardboard tokens. The town, cities, and towers are great. They add some nice dimension to the board and make it easier to assess the game state at a glance. The first player piece and cards are dope too. One is a sweet metal coin, can't go wrong there, and the cards add some unpredictability to your draw. Treasure cards are essentially a wild for discarding to pump other cards' purposes, whereas the immediate effects give a choice of global or faction-specific events, which usually have consequences for everybody at the table. But other than that, the plastic feels cheap, like really cheap. And the counselors, for a collector's edition in 2020, you would think that these would not only be unique sculpts for each player, but also have a moderate level of detail. It goes beyond the collector's edition stuff itself. The production just overall feels lacking. Sure, the faction artwork is great, but better believe that every card within the faction has the same artwork. And speaking of art and design, as much as I love the circular UI of the game, the board feels really washed out and flat. So much so that nothing really pops on it, and the brown and red border territories are really hard to distinguish. Not a crisis since they're on opposite sides of the board, but again, this feels well beneath the production standards of the time, let alone the standards set by Starling's other games like Everdell and Flourish. In truth, if this game weren't so clever and inventive, then the production and presentation wouldn't eat at me so much. I mean, don't get me wrong, this isn't an issue with the aesthetic. I think the overall tone and visuals are pretty great. It just feels like the execution is really dated. But before we wrap up, we have one last thing to cover, and that's the Dark Alliances mini expansion. Consisting of just 10 cards, Dark Alliances is more of a set of promo cards than a real expansion. 5 copies each of 2 different cards to shuffle in each faction's deck. These allow you to either propose a boost for another player's attack, or to take away one of your counselors in exchange for them revealing information, or letting you take over their counselor's action. More than anything else, these allow you to participate in mind games, testing what your opponents are willing to give up during a particular faction's turn, or for you to feign interest in certain outcomes. These are tiny but cool, not essential by any means, but fit cohesively within the spirit of the game. Overall, this feels like a breath of fresh air. I mean, it's familiar yet reinvigorating. And yeah, I do have some issues with the production, and the shadow deceptive play might not be as rich as it could be, but what you get is a game that comes across as inventive, focused, and rock solid. A concise new take on a dusty genre, resulting in something both clever and fun. And that is our review. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Jack with the Cardboard Herald. If you enjoyed this video, we have all kinds of other reviews, interviews, and recommendations via writing, podcasts, and video here on our channel and website cardboardherald.com. Our content is audience supported, so if you want to show your support, please visit our Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Cardboard Herald.